the misfortune of seeing me. Got it? I'm Jerry Hoffman, one of the MRED trainers, been training since '92 actually. And covering the appraiser package is an important part of our arsenal. When we meet an appraiser, we should have something that supports our value. And the reason we put a package together is because frequently appraisers don't know the area as well as you do. They consistently can miss comps and some of the other stats and trends. And some of them come from outside the area, even though they're supposed to be familiar with the area they're working in. Some of them aren't as familiar as they should be. And then again, this is to support your sale price. I tell my clients, seller clients, the most critical thing I do for them after contract is meet the appraiser to make sure we're all on the same page. And just a couple of brief war stories. I recently met an appraiser in Streamwood who did not have his own access to the MLS. He relied on an admin from an office pulling comps and giving it to him. Hasn't used Infosparks, doesn't know how it works, didn't think he had access. Had another appraiser come in, do a great appraisal, but he didn't find two of the most ideal comps. As it turns out, he was from LaSalle, Peru. So it's important that we know who we're meeting and making sure that we get all the data necessary to support our clients. What I'm going to do is just go through a couple of items here, then we're going to go through some practical examples. So the second page is, you can locate this at the state, but this is basically best practices, I'm going to call it, for agents meeting appraisers. We're not going to read through all of those, but if you say, can I meet them? Yes. Can I give them stuff? Yes, you can. And those questions are answered pretty well here. Even the state has a appraiser package handout that's very similar to what I use. Even though it's not identical, it's very, very similar. So when you're going to meet an appraiser and you're going to hand appraiser data and comps, you have to know what the appraiser is looking for. That's what the appraisal considerations is about. And for every rule or guideline, there can be an exception. All they have to do is support it. So for example, they wouldn't typically take a ranch house as a comparable for a two-story. But if there's nothing else available within their ideal time frame and price range, we'll say, they could use an inferior property like a ranch to support a value on a two-story. And I recently had that happen in St. Charles, unincorporated area. What are they looking for? First of all, appraisers don't use price when they search for comps. But the basic things is they don't want an age more than 10-year spread above or below. They want a similar location ideally. They want a room count that's similar. And where you run into that at times might be a 3-bedroom, 2-story with a finished basement that has more countable rooms than a 4-bedroom, 2-story with an unfinished basement. So, and just trained an appraiser office last week in Lincolnwood, and the room count idea for stats helped them a great deal because they were having trouble getting to where they needed to be. Living area, they don't want to see more than a 20% range in square footage. And what we have to be aware of when we're doing our comps in the MLS is we, as agents, can include finished walkout basements and English basements in the approximate square foot field, but an appraiser will not. They're still going to count that as gross living area below grade. So that's also going to impact the price per square foot statistic when you get to that. A couple other things are the style. At least one has to be the same as the subject. Condition and quality. This is referred to as the UAD, Uniform Appraiser Data Set. It's part of every appraisal, and it was attached to the handout, but it tells you what the definitions for each condition and quality are. C1 being the best condition, Q1 being the best quality. And there's a big reason for understanding that, and that'll be on the next chart. And just an excerpt from the Fannie Mae Selling Guide. So what do they need? What are they looking for? They need at least 3 clothes. One's got to be the same type. The other thing is it has to have the same feature. So if you had a house that had an attached garage and then they built a 2-car detached garage, one of your comps should have that same setup. So knowing how to find that in the MLS is kind of a big deal, at least easily. And they need bracketed comps. That means they have to have inferior comps to adjust up and superior comps to adjust down. Most of the agents bring in the highest 3 comps they can find and hope it works. That's not what they need. So following some of these guidelines will make sure that you're giving them something useful. And when we're talking about those adjustments, this chart is a few years old, but it does show based on over a million appraisals done between, I think, 2012, 2015, that the blue bar is the feature that's adjusted. So to the far left, it's living area. And you go over about 6 steps and you got a red outline around one, which is overall condition. Condition and quality are the 2 highest adjustments you get in dollar volume. They're not adjusted as much as square footage and some of the other things, but that's where you get some money. So understanding the UAD condition and quality is going to help you get the right comps in front of an appraiser to make sure you get your value. So what goes into an appraisal package? It doesn't have to be everything, but as a basic guide, if you have multiple offers, who didn't a few months ago, include the multiple offers. It shows demand and shows what people are willing to pay. Now, if you had 30 offers, you're not going to go all 30. My suggestion would be to take the lowest, the highest, and something in between. But if you got 2 or 3 offers on a property, there's nothing wrong with bringing in those additional offers that you received, especially showing, because that helps show more demand and what people are willing to pay for the property. Legal description is just a convenience. It's not a requirement for your package by any means. And if you have a survey, it's there, but they need to include it. And the county recorder is a good place to find it if you can't find it anywhere else, if it's not complete in Remind. But I have frequently gone into the county recorder, grabbed a copy of the legal description and popped it on a piece of paper just to make it easier for the appraiser. And I would say it's helped. Survey, probably the most important document you can give an appraiser. At least that's what I've been told by somebody who owns an appraiser company and does appraiser CE. Forgive me. Floor plan, they like to have floor plans. One of the things that you can do besides a floor plan, if you have them, is you may have a price sheet from when they were being built that identifies the square footage the builder assigned to each floor plan. And that'll just give you one more thing to check to make sure that you're looking at the correct square footage. What I'm going to do next is show you how to bring in some Infosparks, which is an ideal tool for identifying trends and values. Then we're going to go into the statistical reports for connectMLS. And the 3 primary reports I would use is area market survey, market stats, and market conditions. And I run each of those at least 3 different ways. And we'll talk about that when we get there. And then after we get through that, we'll go into the actual search and selection of comps. Does that make sense to anybody besides me? So I'm not going to show you too much about getting it organized. At least I hope I'm not. Can everybody see my MLS screen?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Somebody, if I say something and it doesn't make sense because you can't see it, please shout out. Because sometimes Zoom is just a little funny that way. So the first thing I'm going to go into is Infosparks. Is there anybody not familiar with Infosparks? I like that.
Well, you probably have a few because I promoted this class last night, our new member class. So there's probably a few, but I don't know that you have time today to go into all of that.
No, but I'm just going to explain what it does and why. Because some people don't even know it's here. So if I know the audience needs it, I'll make a push for it. But as we go through this, you're going to see me talk about templates, and you're going to see me talk about one-line reports, custom reports. If you walked into a closet at home and you needed to get dressed, you know what drawer has socks, what drawer has underwear, what drawer has t-shirts, and all the other good stuff you need. Your MLS is your business closet. You need to know where things are and what they do for you. It'll make your job a lot easier. So Infosparks is a statistical program that shows trends. The last 3 years under a bar chart, max time range, and the line graph that you see in front of you, I could carry it all the way back to 2008. And it shows you things that you visually that are hard to see in other ways. And I'm going to go through an actual example for what I would give an appraiser, but to just show you what I mean and why you would want to look at it this way is we got 10 different variables at the top of the page, and we got 23 or 25 different metrics at the bottom. So right now we're looking at the median sales price. We can go to average. And the last year or so, that line at the end here, this is actually May 2020, and you see what's happened since then. But the market doesn't move linearly like this. There's some seasonality to the market. And the best way to show that in Infosparks would be any of these other trend limits. And if I go to the monthly trend, this shows you seasonality in the market. It's different for last year because of COVID. All it did was shift the peak 2 months. I'm going to switch this from 3 years to 5 years just to give you a quick idea before I go into my sample. So if I take this back just, well, max, like I said, is all the way 2008. That looks like a very similar pattern for all those years. And it is. Say again? I missed that if you had a question.
I think it was background noise.
Okay. So when we look at 2016, we're looking at the average sale price, and the peak for the average sale price in 2016 was June. The peak in 2017 was June. 18 was June. Do you get the idea? Each of those were different markets. Some were increasing, some were flat, some were decreasing slightly. But the seasonality in the market is pretty much the same, absent something like a pandemic we just went through. So instead of June, our peak happened to be August. And last year we finished very, very strong. This year we're way ahead of last year, both in transactions and dollars. Now I'm going to cut this back to 3 years. And the first thing you would do, and this is in terms of focusing on what you need for your appraiser, is I can put 4 different areas to compare at one time on Infosparks. And the first thing I want to show is the neighborhood. And then I want to show how the neighborhood relates to, let's say, a mile radius around the neighborhood. And then I want to see what it is to the town overall. And I'll show you a couple of examples why that's important. Before I get into my Crystal Lake example, let me just show you what I mean about the map and why it's important. So under my areas is where you would draw a map. If you've never drawn a map on the MLS or any other source, it's very easy. And if you need help, ask. But this is an actual example for somebody that was helped several years ago. I am only here to show you the map because I want you to see it. Because I've used it in the last 60 days, I don't have to resave it. If you don't use any of these maps that you draw within 60 days, they archive it. If they don't delete it, you could recall it. So in this case, this map was in the Irving Park area of the city, and I call this Kedvale. There was a client selling a single family house in this area. The next map, to Kedvale 2, is slightly larger. Not significant, but slightly larger. So I just took in this little area here, this triangle, and it went from Kenton all the way to Cicero. So now what I do when I use these maps is I will capture this map and I put it in a document for an appraiser so they see what the source is for the data we're showing them, and the source is very important. So let me go to Infosparks. Going to the first tab. I don't have to choose the options like my areas to get those. I can just type the name of it if I know what it is. And at the very bottom of the list is Kedvale under my areas. I go to another tab. Call it Kedvale 2, and we know one's bigger than the other. And this was in the area of Irving Park of the city, which is area 8016. So right now we're looking at the median sales price for these 3 areas, and the quick stats on the line graph that we have shows Kedvale. Actually, the last 12 months over the previous 12 months has declined 4.6. The other map has declined. The larger map has declined almost 12%. And Irving Park overall was up 4%. I'm going to switch this over to average just because most people understand average better than median. And since we have single family property class, that means residential, but I want to focus on detached. So I'm going to do that. Notice the numbers changed significantly when we took the attached properties out of the quick stats. And then it was a traditional sale. And then I can even go into I don't have to go much beyond this, but I can go into square footage. And what this showed the appraiser that he met was, let me back off of square footage. And you don't know what it's going to show until you use it. So in the example now, let me increase the size a little bit. Can you see it better? Yes,
Yeah.
they said with emphasis and enthusiasm in their excited, quivering little voices.
We're trying to get to the mute button. Yes.
No problem. So the very top Kedvale is the smaller map area closer to the property. That actually, in the last 12 months with the other filters, increased 11.5%. In fact, the average sale price for single family that met these criteria is almost, well, it's about $130,000 over single family in that slightly larger map. Don't you think it makes a difference showing an appraiser, the closer you get to the property, the higher the values are? Don't you think that would help get the number you're looking for? As opposed to Irving Park overall, which is 618. The small map has it at 777. So, and the appraiser that did this one for this guy in the city, this was the second property he walked through for the day. The first one was in Antioch. This one in the Irving Park area of the city was the second one. And from there, he was going to Bolingbrook. It's hard to go to those areas and understand all of them as well as you should. And we do teach an appraiser WebEx every month. And we have more agents signing on than appraisers, but when they see how to use this to zero in on value, it does make a difference to them. So let me pull up our Crystal Lake example and see what it does for us. So I'm just going to demo the functionality that we're going to use for the Crystal Lake area. There's at least 4, if not 5 different metrics that I use. So I've already got the areas drawn. You guys saw where we draw maps. So I'm going to go into the first tab. LA. It's getting there. So the first one I'm going to pick from my list is Villages, Crystal Lake, my area, because that's under the my areas section. The second tab, I'm going to put in a mile radius around the my area. One thing about Infosparks that is tough is they don't have a scale on the map when you're drawing that radius. They don't tell you how far out you are. So if you want to keep it within a mile, if that's what you're looking for, or 2 if need be, you want to, what I do is I go into connectMLS and I center on the property and I see what a 1 mile radius around the connectMLS map looks like. And then I just draw my Infosparks map to match that and connectMLS. So the last thing that I'm going to put in here is Crystal Lake as a city, not Area 14 because it includes Lakewood and Prairie Grove. And if you need to, we can even put in zip code to break it down even further, 14 instead of 12. Crystal Lake is a city. So it's a little hard to see with the metrics at the bottom. So I'm just going to close the, well, I need to select my variables at the top. Infosparks property class single family means residential. It does not mean a detached house. If you want detached, you would choose, you would add to the criteria detached under property type. And at the bottom of the grid, you see the criteria that you're using. So right now, I'm on the Crystal Lake City tab, and that's the gold bar. The villages, the neighborhood itself is blue. I'm sorry, that's the 1 mile radius around the villages, and then the villages is in red. So when I hover over this line at any point, I can get, in this case, the average sale price for the end of that month. And if I need to go a little further down the metrics, such as traditional sale, such as maybe square foot, I can do that. Now I can break out multiple filters by using those arrows at the top of certain panels that you have within Infosparks. So if I wanted to show as a comparison attached and detached together, I can only have 6 items. So if I've got 3 tabs used, I can see 2 of these for each of those tabs. So this works. And I'm going to separate it with this arrow. I'm going to hide the variables just so I can see more chart. So this breaks down what's happening in your area by the neighborhood, by a mile around the neighborhood, and that can be increased if need be, and the city overall. And what you're looking for is something that's beneficial to you in terms of value that you would not see perhaps if you just took the area overall. So I am going to take out, oh, and by the way, the filters that we're using can be different for each tab. So when I click on one of these other tabs, I'm still comparing the same 3 areas, but I've got different metrics perhaps that I've been using, or variables that I've been using. I'm just going to leave it on the Crystal Lake tab because that's where we were. I am going to take out, let me bring my metrics back, attached, and just focus on detached. I'll hide that grid again. So what I'm seeing is the villages is up 1.4%, the last 12 months over the previous 12 months. And the within a mile, it's up 14%. So I know there's something around that area that's dragging those prices up. I can also show if it's accelerating or decelerating. So instead of 12 months, how about 6 months? So now we're going up a little bit more in terms of the villages. So that's the last 6 months over the previous 6 months. And in this case, not sure what it'll show, but 3 months is actually declining for detached in our neighborhood. I'm looking at the top metric that's in red, which means when I see this, I'm going to show an appraiser the best data I have. And if that's 6 months over the previous 6 months, I'd do it. I could show both. I could grab the chart for both. But the problem with Infosparks is if I wanted to print this for an appraiser and I go to the print function, this is what I see. I don't see any of the stats on the right-hand side. I just see the lines and I have to guess where they are. I could manually write it on that if I needed to, but instead, and let me move my controls for a little bit. So instead, I did not do that. Tell me I didn't do that.
We're still here.
That's good. I think I closed the window I didn't want to, but that's all right. So what I do for a appraiser is I go to the share function. I go to live, social media, and then I hit share. And what I can copy for them is this URL. Let me do that second. Let me go back to the chart for a minute. Then I got to move my controls again. So the reason this is important is you're trying to show a difference in price from the day it went under contract to today, or to the end of the last complete month. So if you handed them a comp from May of 2021, you see what the average sale prices were then. If I try to print this up here, that box goes away. So what I need to do is find a way to capture this. So when they're looking at one of the comps I give them that went under contract, because they give a time adjustment from the date it went under contract, not the date it closed. So I think a change in the market in the neighborhood from 270 to 306 is significant, and they need to know that. So I will leave this cursor where it is. And then I'm going to use the snipping tool in a PC. That's Windows Shift S, but for a Mac, it's Command F4. And when this comes up, notice I can move my cursor and it doesn't lose the box. So I grab the chart. Appraiser 2 months ago said, so that's how they get those fancy charts in their appraisals. I can't wait to try that. Open up a document. Can you guys see the Word doc?
No.
So let me do a new share. And let me bring in the Word doc. Can you now see a blank Word doc?
Yes.
And I paste the chart. So now they can see what the number was for the end of April compared to today. But I also go back. Let's see. I also go back and remember that share function with the URL. I do live, do share, grab the URL, copy it, go back to my Word doc. Can you guys still see the Word document?
No, yes, I can. Sorry,
Yes.
that is the Word doc. Yes.
So I label this as live link. And I paste this. So this is one of the documents that decided to go away. Control V. So there's the URL I just copied. And the reason that's important is they can scan it. I can email them this if they want. But if they go to that URL that we just pasted, it takes them to this live chart. So if I give them comps that went under contract in May, they can get their number. In April, July, whatever, they can get their number and compare it to the most recent price valuation. Does that kind of make sense to anybody besides me? When do you use median? When do you use average? I'll use it whenever it supports you, but with consumers, I use average. With appraisers, I tend to go to median because that's what they do both, but median seems to be what they focus on. So besides price by property type and square foot, let me go back to Infosparks. I would then give them market time and do the same thing. Copy, paste, put the URL in. I would give them price per square foot. And again, it's the same thing. Now the square foot is always been an issue because agents don't properly report square foot frequently. And this is from the approximate square foot field. But these are the numbers we have to deal with. So I want to show them this is what it was. It was $121 a foot last October. And at this point, it's $136 a square foot. That's up 12% in the last 6 months over the previous 6 months. So sales price, price per square foot, market time, and month supply. And of course, month supply is hiding under this, because those are all things that the appraiser needs to know. Do you see the value in this?
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to change from one of these brackets to another just to see which one gives you the best option. I met an appraiser several months ago in Kildare at 4 o'clock on a Sunday. I said, this is unusual for an appraiser, 4 o'clock on a Sunday. And he said, well, that was the 9th house he walked through that day. And then he's going to take all those notes that he had from all those houses and start doing his appraisals when he got home. I'm not sure he's going to remember the house as well as he should without some other reminders. So that's why I put a package together like this. So if you don't know how to use Infosparks, there's more to know about this, but this basic example shows clearly, I think, why you need to use Infosparks, not only for an appraiser, but for your clients when you do a listing presentation. I'm next going to bounce into the stats for connectMLS, and then I'm going to go into connectMLS searching and how to get the best comps that you can that are going to make sense to the appraiser. Any questions on Infosparks at all? I'll take that as
Nothing in the chat box.
all I saw in the chat box was it made sense, and that's fine. Whoops, didn't want to go that low. back to 100. So I'm going to close Infosparks and go back to Connect. Close the tools, resources, and links. And the reports are accessed from the toolbar at the top. I can choose the report immediately, which is what I'm going to do, or I could just go into a full page menu. And the three reports that I use are A, the market conditions addendum. That's required in every appraisal since 2009. In 2019, I believe, Fannie Mae said they no longer require it, but lenders can ask for it. And every appraiser I've met since has asked, includes it in the appraisal. Freddie and HUD still require them. The next one that I will do after that is the market statistics. Breaks it out by bedroom and shows the SPLP ratios and time on market and percentage of market that sells. An area market survey that breaks it down by price bracket and shows competition, which is active listings, activity, I call it, something under contract, and history, which are the sold. I'm going to start with the market conditions addendum. So if you've never used the MRED stats or connectMLS stats, a couple of things you need to know. One is you cannot set up a default search template like you can in the regular search module. This is still a classic version, but you can create a save search. So you can go to the bottom, you can add and remove the fields that you want to use periodically, like to exclude distressed properties or style of property or number of rooms instead of bedrooms, whatever. You don't have to use them every time you do it, but you just have to have them available to see if they're going to make a difference in your stats. So once you create your initial template, I'm going to just bring up the one that I have. So I've added a number of fields here that I can use as needed. I don't have to use them all. I do include school district. Recently saw an appraisal for Barrington Hills that was in District 300, and the appraiser made a $75,000 adjustment for being in the District 300 as opposed to Barrington District 220. I'd like to see his files on that, but because that seems excessive in my mind, but it does make a difference sometimes. So here's my my save template, and I do 3 reports, one for the neighborhood, one for a mile around the neighborhood, and one for the entire area. So if I went in and drew a map and displayed it, I'm just going to bring up a previously drawn map. So I went in, I drew a map for the neighborhood just like this. Now this includes the townhouses, I know, but because the property selection is detached, that doesn't matter. It won't include those. And if you weren't sure where to cut it off, if you wanted to, you could always switch to the satellite view. Look at the rooftop, see what the differences are. That's another day, let's say a map search class. So this is the area I drew for the neighborhood. When I get that in, I save it. And I give it a name because it's typically going to start with my report template name. I'm going to save it as a new search with the subdivision drawn. And it doesn't go away, it always stays there. And now I've got the neighborhood drawn. I can add any other criteria that I feel necessary. So when it was crashing, I would include with and without distressed properties to show the difference. And sometimes it made a big difference, sometimes not. Generating this report. This is to be used for trends. Is it increasing, decreasing, or stable? So you will see this chart in a UAR, and they break it up into 3 parts. The oldest 6-month period out of 365 days, a previous 3-month period, and a most recent 3-month period, and they decide, is it increasing, decreasing, or stable? The curious thing is the sold median sales price for the most recent period. I have seen multiple appraisals use this for value. In other words, the value of the property was the same value that appeared in this cell. That's too frequent to be coincidental. That's a target that some people have. So I want to make sure we get the best that we can out of this. So I would run these numbers, then I would go back and I'm going to change it to the next report, which is a mile radius. Under reports, by the way, the market conditions addendum is the only place where you can see the actual listings that made up the report. if I make selections and show just those selections here, it will change the numbers. Oops, wrong icon. I'm hitting everything but what my target is. So if I go to the stats report, these numbers that you see will change, but they will not change on the original form that was shown. Appraisers sometimes like to take out certain properties. So when we train them, we show them this is where they would do that. But this is the only report that shows the actual listings that made up the report. So we did the neighborhood. I come back to my search screen. I go in to change the boundary. I'm going to drop a 1 mile radius on top of this. And there's my 1 mile radius. I'm going to answer OK. I'm going to generate the report. I print this out and put them side by side. And when I hand it to the appraiser, I make sure they know that the circle is a 1 mile radius. So I just write that on a printed piece that I have out. We'll show you a sample of how all these pieces are put together. So yes, I would print this out. Could save it as a PDF if I wanted to lump it all together, and I'm beginning to think that's a better idea than just printing it out. So then I would go back. We're still on market conditions addendum. I'm going to clear the map. I can use area or city. I have to use area or county, I should say. I'm going to put in 14, but I only want Crystal Lake, so I'm going to use city, because city alone is not enough for these reports sometimes. And I do want to point out all statistic reports in Connect do not count bedrooms below grade. Notice the field for bedroom says above grade only. So if you've got a house with a split level and that lower level is considered basement, they would not be counting that as a bedroom. So frequently what I do, as I mentioned before, is I would use the room count along with these reports to make sure I'm focusing on the property with the living spaces similar to the subject. But for right now, we're going to leave it at the 1 mile radius, generate the report, print this report out. You can see it's a different report when you're doing it's a little higher the closer we got to the neighborhood. And then the last thing I'm going to do, I did that. You saw the area. Now I'm going to do with just the city itself, which is what we looked at. We saw the neighborhood, I did the mile, and then this is the entire city. So all three of those reports would be collated together. I do the exact same thing for the next three reports. The nice thing about saving this report in any one of these, like that subdivision map that I drew, is it's available in any report that you're going to use. So let me go to market stats. I'm not going to show all three for this one. I'm just going to recall what I've already saved. I'm going to run this report. So within the neighborhood, there's currently one active listing, 3-bedroom, listed for $365. Under that, we've got broken down by bedrooms, all bedrooms, 3, 4, 5 or more. We have the numbers sold in the last whatever period I have. In fact, let me back up. So this report should not be all months. I should have a limit in here. Where is my months back? I know it's easier for me to see than you guys, but I don't see months back. Let me add remove. How that got to be missing, I can't tell you. Because I would usually go in the reports 12 months back, not 6. Looked like a lot of properties. That's why I was questioning.
I think we're all going, Great. It's not just us that have problems with this.
You know, sometimes this is why they make vodka. So yeah, and sometimes you hit something wrong and it doesn't do what you expected. So this breaks it down by bedroom. There's 14 sold in all in the neighborhood in the last 12 months. 6 were 3-bedroom and 8 were 4-bedroom. Sometimes you'll see 5-bedroom listings and 0% sold. So this is not a bad report at the time because everything listed is sold, and knowing what we just came out of, I would expect that. But it also has the original price, the price they dropped to at the time they sold, what the sale price was, and for the ones that did not sell, what their pricing was. So they priced it to expire, they priced it to sell. Just a side note about this market stats report, if you've never used it before and you meet a new buyer, let's say, and you're looking at a couple of different areas, one of the questions they always seem to ask is, so how much do you think these go for in this area routinely? So for the first meeting, if I'm in different areas, I will do one of these reports with a half-mile radius centered on the property I'm going to show and say, this is what we have for this area. I don't do it for every listing and every time we go out, just the first time to get them acquainted with the market and what we have available to find out. So that tells them where the market is. And what is no surprise to anybody, in the last 12 months, we're looking at most of these are getting over list price. All of these show over 100% SPLP and OLP ratios. So I would do this report 3 ways as well. And then the same functionality for the, let me just go up here for the area market survey. Whoops. A little slow on a hit, that's all. Area market survey, your saved template. And all I'm going to do is generate the report. And then after this displays, I would do the same thing. Go back and put a mile radius around the neighborhood, go back and do a city area. And for Crystal Lake, I would separate it between 12 and 14 because there is a difference of those 2 areas. So this breaks it down by price bracket and days on market. So right now we see there's no under contract, which means we have no current activity. If I get down to sold, this is history. We can see easily what the bread and butter market range is. So if I'm sitting here over 400, there's not a whole lot happening under 400. I've got to be real good about what I put together for the seller and for the appraiser. But this is where I expect it to be, which means if I see something significantly less, it could be one of those flip potentials, or it's just overlapped into an area that you don't want. And there's ways to eliminate those from the filter screen. So this is history, and then what the current competition is what's on the market. And right now we have 1 on the market. It's been on the market for 3 days, and it's 365. All of these together build a trend that is either beneficial or detrimental to or from the subject. You would never use something that is detrimental to your value. If you have to tweak it a little bit to make it more to your advantage, you should certainly do that. Everybody understand why the statistics are important? So one of that Kildare appraiser that I talked to, I mentioned before, the previous appraisal, they were having a second one done. The first appraisal called it a balanced market. And I don't think anybody was considering the market balanced last summer. But when you looked at the luxury market in that area, Kildare, Long Grove, it was a balanced market. So the first appraiser, in my opinion, got that right. Have no idea what the second guy did. So now it comes to actually supporting with actual comps and market data, if you will. So with no questions left on the stat report, and if you need to see something again or more in depth, please ask. But I'm going to go into search. So when I'm looking for comps or CMA, I've already got a template set up for new people that have not taken a class. All that is, a template, is arranging the fields you want with the initial criteria on the left-hand side, saving that as a manual search. And then when you come into the search function, you can go to your save searches, and we now have a search box. So if I'm looking for my CMA template for detached, all I have to do is click on it and it's ready to go. So just to give you an idea how it works, it may not be as clear when I give this example. Let me show you another PDF. And this is one for selecting comps. We've done this for a couple offices recently, my own included, but this tells you basically what the appraisal considerations are again. It shows you the fields that you're going to use and the steps that you go through. And what you're watching as that happens on the map is where listings pop up that are beneficial. So the subject neighborhood in this PDF is at the top. I can see this area here that had comps fell off when I put the age in, so they were outside the age range. This is a step-up neighborhood because they're in the mid-4s to high-4s, where the subject property was in the high-3s to low-4s. But this neighborhood over here that's still on was a similar level to my subject. It's nice to have this visual, so you know what to pick and where. And just looking at the comps on the map make a lot of sense. Another class, another time, but that's how I use this in this format, just to make it easier for me to identify properties and areas that are similar. Underneath that, and what you should have with the handout, is an actual printed sample of the one-line report used for appraisers. So the fields used for the listings to view are given here. You're gonna have something similar in the appraisal package. We go back to Connect. So to start picking comps, I go to the map. I will center on the subject area or subject property. So I'm going to center on. And for grins, and it helps to have the city in there. Sometimes this thing will put you in Iceland. Enter. So there's my neighborhood that I zeroed in on. That's not the villages. I know this is actually Hampton Hills where this one is, but I center on the property. I do a 1 mile radius. Just hit the enter key and apply. Then I start going down. I'm leaving this at 6 months for the moment. If I don't have enough, I'll change that. Year built. So these were built in the early 90s for the most part. So I'm going to look, and you can't have more than a 10-year spread in age. So I'm going to pull up 1985 for a minimum. I know that's not quite 10 years, but I think if I get closer to 80, the houses were a little different in 1980 to 85 than they were in a later part of the 80s. And the max range, I'm going to put, let's say 2005. It's okay to be not exactly 10 years apart because nothing is going to be perfect. So you need a little leeway, and there are exceptions, especially if they support value. So we see that we're whittling down our matches. The next thing I'm going to go into is age. I'm sorry, I just had the year built. I'm not going to do the individual age. Square feet. And if the subject property is, let's say, 2,200 square feet, I would look somewhere from 1,800 square feet to 2,700 or 2,800 square feet. 20% is the range. But let's see what we get. Actually, 26 would be better. Now, we know some don't report square foot, so if I check the box underneath that says include square foot, I've got it. I'm down to 79 matches. Now, there's additional things I can do. For example, I need the same type property, but some people call a raised ranch a two-story, unfortunately. So all I'm going to do at this point, because I have the advanced search options on for these Boolean operators, instead of picking the ones I do want, I'm just going to tell the system I don't want a ranch. I don't want a one-story. How special is this? Those couldn't all have been ranches. Got to see the data on that one. The next thing, not going to condo. We got style that I'm not thrilled with because we went down to 1. So I got to look at my list to see what that is. We got square foot, we got age. Those are the biggies. And I can show my list at the same time as the map. Nice thing about the list is you can do a wrap to fit. So you don't have to scroll back and forth to see all the things you put on your one-line report. This is a basic searching report. These are the fields I have for searching. So I created a custom report. And if you have no idea how to create a custom report, that's one of the next classes you should take. And this is for my CMA selection. And the reason I have it set up the way I do is because I've got fields that help me. For example, the okay to share with clients field from private and show yes or no from private. So although this isn't a standard network at the moment, because it's not flagged as private, I know it started in the private network. So if I need to find that history for how long it was in private, I can do that. So it was in private for 10 days before they made it live in the standard listing network. But I don't have to go through every listing to see if it was in private. The other thing, and let me just bring this out a little bit, is I have the above grade approximate square foot field, which the agent can include finished walkout and finished English. I have the above grade square foot and total finished square foot if the agent put it in. But sometimes when you look at these square foot numbers, it makes you wonder, oh, you know what I did on my filters? Let me bring my filters back for a second. So when I went to style or type, must have one or more is what I use for one story. And that's how I got down to 1. Must not have is what I wanted, 1 story. So, and I took the 1 ranch out. Got to put it in the right place to get what you expect. So looking at this, they got total finished square foot, 857 square feet, but they got approximate square foot at 1117, or I'm sorry, 2117. You know, there's something going on with the square foot there. I'll look at the tax record in a second. I just want to look at some of these others. So you want to find something within a 20% range of the subject square foot. Some people put it in, some don't. Here we've got 2281 above approximate square foot and above grade, but total finished is 3402. I can look at that in the listing. So I know that the approximate square foot has the opportunity to be incorrect because they auto-populated from the tax database. And I know that because the building assessor square foot field is auto-populated by the tax database when you choose to do that, and you can't change it as an agent. So if the assessor says the building square foot is 3153, you would expect the approximate square foot field to be the same thing, and it's not. You have, and I like this, that the agent put in the square foot. It's not required, but broke it down by these categories. Sometimes, and I'm going to look at the tax record. Can you guys see the tax record?
Yes.
Cool. So here we've got for the tax record 31 above grade 3153. They also have building square foot as 3153. It is not uncommon at times in our public records to see, in this case, instead of the 3153, they might show 20 something. And then when they add the basement square foot, the below grade square foot, that becomes a gross square foot, which they put into building. So sometimes our public records will have it wrong. If this doesn't make sense to you, the best place to go, if they have it, is the township site. In this case, Grafton Township. And there's a link to the county directly through Remind. And the only thing I'll say about going to the township is you frequently get data that's missing in our Remind public records or incorrect in our public records. And I just tapped the screen, didn't mean to, but this is how I'd get into the township to get that data to make sure it's right. And that's why I include, or you should include, not just the agent full listing for the appraiser, but also the tax report and the listing history. So all the things that I talk about, including in a appraiser package, are things that appraisers have actually told me they find beneficial. So looking at the square footage the way I have helps me focus on the right things for the right property. If I want to see where it's located, let me show my list again. Yeah, it's not going to do the filters at the same time, and that's fine. But if I have the auto zoom function active and the map, when I click on the locator icon, it zooms me into that property. So I know how close it is. I can get to the listing here. And I can go into the other details. So I got square foot and the other stuff. If I need more details, I can grab them. So I make my selections for the listings that I want, and I do two things. We're going to run over just a minute or two, if that's okay with you guys. Is this a 1 hour or 1.5?
Supposed to be 1 hour, Jerry.
We're just about there. So when I take these and I take it into print, however many I'm going to hand them, I will go to print. They need the agent full. They also want a copy of the listing history and the tax report. Now, this is the Remind tax report that you're going to get. It doesn't collate them. So if I'm printing out 10 listings for the appraiser, I get 10 agent full, then I get the 10 listing history, then I get the 10 tax report. I collate them together, staple them together, and then make some notes. But this is how you get to printing these things out with these 3 reports all together. And you do that for each and every one of the comps. I also do the entire one-line report that we've created. So I will do print. I want all listings now, not just the ones I selected. And I have a report set up for an assessor. I'm sorry. I had one set up for an appraiser to include the things that they want. I just did my CMA selection. That's the one we've been looking at. So that's the one I'm going to use. Maybe I'll label it comp selection. Either way. So I'll check this. And uncheck this. This is going to give me 2. I just want to see what the difference was that I had for these. When I go to print, I need to go to landscape. I need to go to legal. Custom margins for me are not more than ½ inch all the way around. And sometimes you get everything, sometimes you don't. I include the additional sales info field to flag the distress sales and flag the, say, corporate relocations and so on. Broker notices would tell me that there's multiple offers, highest and best called for, or hazardous conditions exist, or whatever the notices are. So when I go to do this, I'm going to leave it in the PDF mode. I'm not going to actually print the paper, but let me just do it here and do it. So now we got it saved. You should be able to see it as soon as I open it up. This seems like a lot of work for some people. I'm not sure how you view it. This is the one that I just saved. Can you see this PDF?
Yes.
Very, very cool. I'll make it a little larger. Actually, one of the other ones I think was a better report. But at the top for this particular report, I've got the square foot information on the left-hand side. Looking for my cursor. There we go. I got the share and show for private listing network here. I've got the square foot data here, and I put bedrooms, rooms, and baths on this side just so it's easier to see and I don't have to scroll back and forth. On the far right, let me bring this over a little bit. We've got additional sales info field. So if there was any distress or REOs, they would see that. I also include the seller concession column. So, and I would total that up for them because they need to know how many properties had seller concessions, and it's far less today than it was just a few months ago. One note about seller concessions, it's for the amount negotiated at the time of contract, should not include home inspection credits after contract. But frequently you see them. So this property here had $1,000 seller concession. Could have been an inspection, could have been at the time of contract. This one had I think 5,000 right here. So I print this out completely. I give them the individually selected listings, and then I hand them this one-line spread to show them this is everything. And the way we organize this, I'll back up now. So after the appraisal package, here we're talking about organizing it, and this is exactly the way that I hand it to an appraiser. This is one of the things that'll change in the final format for this, but in this case, I had a survey went on top, had the subject property with the tax report listing history. He had a permit for work done, had the permit included. Then the subject listing with the listing history and tax report, and then the comps all set up. Let me just bring this up. So we had the floor plan, had the permit. Here's my closed comps that I put together. Here's the neighborhood map area that I searched to get those. Here's the Infosparks charts, and you can see the URL for the live link and the reports we talked about. And sometimes I do a 4-mile summary for some of these if I have to, depending on density. And what I do, this one's here to show that if you can see it, the actual comps I go through and I put an X by the things they're looking for. They want to know you're built for this comp. They want to know the contract date. They maybe want to know that the garage is different than the subject or the basement. So I make it easy for them to find what they're looking for. And if I know this to be incorrect, I'll write it there and I attach the tax report from the township or Remind if I need to show that's why you can't take it at face value. When we meet, this is exactly what I give them. And I don't go deep into it. I say, I brought some things for you. Here's a copy of the legal description and or survey. Here's the floor plan. Here's the subject property with listing history and tax report. Comps all have the same thing. I ran the 1004 MC a few different ways. And I had one appraiser in Elk Grove Village say, well, I just do the whole city. I don't need to break it down. And I was able to show her the difference in value and trend between one school district and the other because there was a boundary very close to the property. And she spent a little time looking at that. She looked at me and asked if I wanted to write the report. You don't know until you look at the data. Don't assume that the appraiser knows what they're looking for because they don't all know A, the area as well as you do as an agent, and B, they don't know how to use the MLS as well as you do or should. And that's why I put together what I do. It supports my client. This is just, the one-line report that was attached to the handout shows I can determine if it was in private. This is in a different order than what I just printed, but here's the seller concessions, and I'll write that up. 10 out of 20 had seller concessions. And here's your square foot field. The other thing are the price differentials, days on market, listing market time, cumulative market time, and so on. All of this is geared to making the appraiser's job as easy as possible, but to make sure I put what I feel supports value in front of them. Here's the actual one that was attached. It's a little bigger so you can see the fields. They don't have to be in this layout. You don't have to include everything I did. I just find that this works very well for me. And every time I think I can skate, something tells me not to. Just put the package together. It's what I'm paid to do. Here's that UAD we talked about in the beginning, talking about condition and quality and the definitions they have. It's important to understand these so you understand why an appraiser makes the adjustments he does. Sorry to run over. First time we presented it like this. I hope it was worth your time. Any questions? Anybody not in a coma?
I think this is awesome. Thank you.
It works for me, I know, and I have agents tell me all the time that it works. It's beneficial. If you can't support your value, how is an appraiser supposed to support it? So looking at these details is kind of important. I hope that's what you expected to get. Colleen, you got anything you want to add, or Jim? All right, kids, well, your parole came through. Thank you for flying Delta. You want to end it or go for questions, Colleen?
Kelly, still have two.
I think we're good. All right, guys, have a good time.
Gary, thank you so much.
You bet. Somewhere in my toolbar, where did I put it? There it is, right in front of me.
Well, when you're ready, let me know. I'll end it.
I'm ready. I'm going to go ahead and sign out. And if you guys got any questions, you know how to reach me.
All righty, Jerry. Thank you. You have a great
You bet.
weekend. Bye-bye,
too.
everyone. I'm gonna end it.